What if every Sony Animation movie was part of one giant story? I'm not talking about Easter eggs, I'm talking about a deliberate plan that connects Spider-Verse to Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. And once you see the FLDSMDFR tech hidden in Miguel O'Hara's lab, you'll realize the clues were there the whole time. Let's start with the one that broke the internet and Sony accidentally confirmed themselves. You know that insane climax at the end of Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse? The one where the super collider tears open reality and starts sucking everything into a dimensional void? Great action sequence. Totally chaotic. The kind of scene where your brain is so overwhelmed by the visuals that you stop processing individual details and just absorb it. That's exactly what Sony was counting on. Because buried in that swirling vortex of collapsing dimensions is a very specific train car. Not just any train car, the exact train car from Hotel Transylvania 3. And here's where it gets weird. It's not just sitting there as background decoration. It's glitching, phasing in and out of the dimensional rift the same way out-of-universe objects behave throughout the entire film.
I mean, you're supposed to be dead.
Surprise!
End of flashback.
Under Spider-Verse's own internal physics, that means it came from somewhere real, a different dimension, and floating right alongside it, doing the exact same thing. Flint Lockwood's food machine from Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. The FLDSMDFR, phasing through the rift like it was pulled from its home universe mid-scene. This isn't background art, this is a security breach. Sony's own multiversal physics are telling you that Dracula's hotel and Flint Lockwood's food replicator exist in real, separate dimensions that just got ripped open by the collider. Two completely different franchises, two completely different tones, audiences, and storylines. And yet, same multiverse, same rules, same consequences. Sony's own director Chris Miller pointed this out himself on social media after the film released. They put it there on purpose. The Hotel Transylvania train car wasn't a decoration, it was a passport stamp. And the glitch effect was Sony quietly confirming it passed through border control. Every Sony Animation film exists in the same interconnected multiverse, and they've been planting that flag since 2018. The question is, how deep does it go? Deeper than you think, because there are two men responsible for almost all of it. And they didn't just make movies. They built a secret language that only Sony movies speak. Phil Lord and Chris Miller directed Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs in 2009. Then they produced Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse in 2018. Then they produced The Mitchells vs. the Machines in 2021. On the surface, those are three wildly different movies. A food disaster comedy, a multiverse superhero story, a family road trip against a robot apocalypse. Nothing in common, right? Wrong. Every single project they touched at Sony introduced a concept, a visual style, or a character detail that the next film quietly inherited and escalated, like chapters of a book written in a code only they understand. Cloudy introduced the idea of a single inventor whose creation accidentally reshapes the entire world around him.
Water goes in the top, and food comes at the bottom.
Science gone wrong at a catastrophic, reality-altering scale. Spider-Verse took that same concept and blew the walls out entirely. Instead of one town being consumed by food, it's the entire multiverse being consumed by a collider. The Mitchells took it one step further. A family whose ordinary world gets swallowed by a technological force they never asked for. Each film escalates the stakes of the previous one. Each film speaks the same visual language as the last. The technology developed for Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, was directly reused and expanded for the Mitchells versus the Machines. That's not a cost-cutting shortcut. That's a deliberate design choice to make these worlds feel like they belong in the same creative ecosystem, because they do. And then in Across the Spider-Verse, Lord and Miller reach all the way back to 2009 and pull Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs directly into Spider-Verse canon, placing the FLDSMDFR inside Spider-Bite's holographic room like a signature. A reminder, the Lord and Miller code goes back 15 years. They were always writing the same story, you just didn't know you were reading it. I found a press release from 2019 that Sony probably wishes they could delete. When Sony Animation president Christine Belson unveiled The Mitchells vs. the Machines at the Annecy Film Festival, she casually dropped a detail that rewrites everything about how that movie was conceived. The original concept had the worlds the Mitchell family and the robots live in as initially separate universes before colliding, a direct parallel to the multiverse mechanics that Spider-Verse had introduced just 1 year earlier. The robots threatening the Mitchells weren't originally from their world, they were dimension-hopping invaders. The Mitchells versus the Machines was, in its earliest form, a full multiversal collision story, exactly like Spider-Verse, before that concept was quietly pulled from the finished film and buried in a festival press release that most people never saw. The film you watched, where a quirky family saves the world from a robot uprising, that was the scaled-back version. The original pitch had entire universes colliding, which means the Mitchells were always conceived inside the same creative framework as Miles Morales. Sony greenlit a multiverse movie, stripped the multiverse out of the final cut, and then never mentioned it again. Until now, because the DNA stayed baked into every frame. They used the exact same technology, the same visual pipeline, the same painted CGI approach that makes Spider-Verse feel like a living, breathing comic book panel. When you're building a multiverse where every universe has its own visual signature, making two films look identical is not a stylistic choice. It's a declaration. These worlds belong in the same branch of the same reality, and the press release from 2019 is the receipt. And if Sony bearing a multiverse origin story in a festival press release wasn't enough, their own social media team finished the job. In the very first trailer for Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, there's a moment where Gwen Stacy walks into Miles' room and glances at a shelf. Most people scrolled past it, didn't register, just another background detail in a frame already packed with 100 things competing for your attention. Easy miss, except Sony's official animation account immediately quoted the trailer and called it out themselves. Sony Pictures Animation confirmed that Katie's moose from the Mitchells versus the Machines appears as an Easter egg in the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse first look. They didn't wait for fans to find it, they announced it, which tells you exactly how intentional that placement was. Now think about what that actually means within the logic of these films. This isn't like finding a hidden Mickey in a Disney park, a fun wink that exists outside the story's reality. Spider-Verse is a film whose entire internal logic is built around objects and people from different dimensions physically crossing into each other's worlds. The multiverse in these films is not a metaphor. It's a functional in-universe system with rules. So when a toy from Katie Mitchell's world shows up on Miles Morales' shelf in a separate dimension, confirmed by the studio, that's a canonical object that has crossed a multiversal border. Katie's moose has been to another universe. It might have arrived the same way the Hotel Transylvania train car did, glitching through a rift, pulled from one reality into another by a dimensional event. Sony didn't tweet about it for fun. They were making a statement. The Mitchells and the Spider-Verse don't just share a visual style or a production studio, they share a multiverse. And Katie's moose sitting on Miles' shelf is not an Easter egg. That's a signed affidavit. But the wildest part of all of this isn't what they've already connected. It's the system they built to do it. Because once you understand it, you'll never watch a Sony Animation movie the same way again. In Across the Spider-Verse, every universe Miles visits has its own distinct animation style. The different universes were designed to look like they were each drawn by a different artist. So the visual style itself becomes the emotional and geographic identity of each world. Earth 65 looks like impressionistic watercolor paintings. The main Spider Society universe has a sleek, futuristic graphic novel aesthetic. Every world is visually distinct because it's supposed to be. The art style is the universe's address. That's not just cool filmmaking, that's a rulebook. And Sony just handed you the decoder ring. Here's how to use it. Look for the halftone dots and ink outlines. That specific visual texture, the one that makes Spider-Verse look like a living comic panel, appears in The Mitchells versus the Machines too. Same dots, same lines, same painted CGI signature. If you see those dots, you're looking at what fans are already calling the Lord Miller cluster, the branch of the Sony multiverse where Spider-Verse and the Mitchells coexist. Hotel Transylvania doesn't have those dots. Different visual signature, different dimensional address, which is exactly why the train car had to phase through a rift to get to Miles' universe. It was crossing cluster borders. Sony isn't being stylistically consistent by habit. They're using animation style as a geographic coordinate system. Every visual choice is a location marker. Every texture is a zip code. And now that you know what to look for, every new Sony Animation film they release is going to tell you exactly where in the multiverse it lives, before a single character says a word. Lord and Miller didn't stumble into this. They designed it, and they left you the map. Here's where it gets genuinely unsettling, because the first film told you the biggest twist of the sequel 5 years before anyone saw it coming. When Miles gets bitten by the radioactive spider in Into the Spider-Verse, there's a detail so easy to miss that most people watch the film a dozen times without catching it. The spider glitches. Not in the dramatic, story-relevant way characters glitch when they're out of their home dimension. In the exact same subtle, flickering way. The spider that bites Miles is displaying the visual signature of something that doesn't belong in his universe, because it doesn't. It came from Earth 42. That's not all. In the same scene, as Miles gets bitten and his spider sense activates for the very first time, the colors flash green and purple, not the red and blue of Spider-Man. Green and purple, the exact color scheme of the Prowler, the villain his Uncle Aaron was, the identity that, in an alternate universe, Miles himself became. And underneath those colors, almost inaudible beneath the score, the Prowler's sound effect. Woven directly into the musical cue of his origin moment, Sony's own creative team confirmed the color detail was deliberate. The green and purple spider sense wasn't a glitch in the animation. It was a statement about Miles's actual destiny, or what his destiny was supposed to be before the wrong spider bit the wrong kid in the wrong universe.
You're not supposed to be Spider-Man! No!
The entire premise of Across the Spider-Verse, that Miles is an anomaly who was never meant to become Spider-Man, was encoded into his very first scene in the franchise. They knew exactly where the story was going, and they hid the ending in the colors of a single frame that lasts less than 2 seconds. And those green and purple colors? They were only half the spoiler, because Sony hid the other half in a number they put everywhere. 42 appears on the radioactive spider that bites Miles. When Miles crashes into a building on his first web swing, the numbers that fall off the sign and land beside him on the pavement are a 4 and a 2. In Across the Spider-Verse, Miles wears a basketball jersey with the number 42, and the universe Miles gets accidentally sent to at the end of the film, where his alternate self became the Prowler instead of Spider-Man, is Earth 42. So the colors told you what Miles was supposed to become, and 42 told you exactly where. Every single time that number appeared on screen across both films, it wasn't a tribute or a running gag. It was a coordinate, a multiversal address embedded into the franchise from the very beginning, pointing directly at the universe where the wrong version of Miles' story played out. The spider came from Earth 42. Miles ends up trapped on Earth 42. His alternate self, who never became Spider-Man, lives on Earth 42. And that number was sitting on the spider, on the sign, on the jersey, hiding in plain sight across 5 years of films, waiting for enough people to finally connect the dots. That's not Easter egg culture. That's architecture. Sony built the twist into the foundation of the first movie and then watched millions of people walk past the answer for half a decade without ever looking down. Sony Animation has spent over a decade hiding the answer in plain sight, and we've only just started pulling the thread. Which theory hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments, because I read every single one. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and watch this video right here because it goes even deeper into the rabbit hole.